Hello, I'm Debs Kay. Thanks so much for joining me this week and welcome to my little studio. Okay, so as we're getting a little bit Christmassy now, I thought we'd do a little cherub. This one's a little stone statue cherub. He was so sweet, just a little 8x8 this week, but it's really quite detailed. So take some time building up lots of little gentle, soft layers, trying to get moss and things like that. So it's quite a sweet little tutorial. I do utilise a few pastel pencils in this, and as it's so small, it's probably an idea if you do have pastel pencils. But obviously, if you want to have a go at painting and make it bigger, then you can use soft pastels, no problem at all. All right then, okay, so let's have a little look at the colours I chose and let's get painting. So here are the selection of sort of colours I picked out from my palette. As always, didn't probably use all of them, but you do see the selection of, I did use all of the pencils, and I've got a selection of light to dark, warm greys there, and a few greens. As I say, because I've done this painting so small, the pastel pencils are really handy. But if you do your painting larger, you can obviously do it all in soft pastels. All right, so let's get painting. So now you're seeing me coming in with a nice sharp dark value there, and I'm just going to go over sort of like my trace down that I did there, and just sort of bring out certain areas and make sure that I've got everything where I wanted to do. So I'm literally just going around, just looking at all the darkest areas first, taking my time, especially around around his features and things. It's very tiny little area. As I say, this is only an 8x8, and he's quite small within it, so this is tiny. So do make sure your pastels are nice and sharp. It really will help you if you can have a nice sharp edge. And then obviously, if you've got a long shaft on your pastel, that also makes it easier for sort of when you come to use it as a blending tool. But for now, I'm using it on its tip very lightly, as I always do, and just sort of like making sure that I get his eye in the right place, and those features in the right place. They're the most important things that are going to portray his character, really. And like I said earlier, I love this little half dozy little cherub just opening one eye. So I really wanted to make sure that his eye and his little smirk and things are looking good before I sort of go on much further. And as you can see there, that first value I used was a very dark grey, and then now I've come in with sort of like a mid to dark tone grey, and I'm using that in the areas where it's not as dark as his eyes. So I'm going in all those areas, sort of like, the little, where he's got little shadows and things under his nose. Now this little guy, obviously it's a statue, or a little cast statue there. And I did like this, now obviously you can paint him sort of like just as a normal little cherub without his moss and things like that, just, if he's landing on a natural thing. But I did actually, I love the little stone statue. So I wanted to create it like this, and I wanted to create the moss, and I wanted to create a really detailed picture for this. I thought he was such a chubby but delicate little guy there, and I wanted to get that, and I wanted to get the feeling that he really, he was a little statue in this. He's sort of come to earth, and his statue decides himself. That's not even a word, but there we are. But yes, I wanted to do that. So I really do take my time on this painting, and even though it's a little one, and that's it, whether I paint large or small, I do take my time, and especially when I'm doing something detailed like this. So initially what I'm doing, as I say, I'm going in with those couple of values. I'm working on his head first. I want to see if I can create that character and start to create that depth on his sort of head and hair and things like that first. Then I'll come sort of like towards the rest of his body and do a little bit of shading. But you're going to see me going through with sort of 2 or 3 different values, just picking out those darkest areas, and sort of working my way up the value scale. Sometimes, sort of using my pencil on the tip or just slightly on the side, depending on where I am and what I want to create in any area. I always, I always, sort of vary my pressure, and vary, very, vary my stroke depending on where I'm going. Always trying to bear in mind the way things are growing. For example, when I come up to his hair, I'll be paying attention to, how his little curls are forming. And I'm going, at the moment, as I say, I'm going between between my sort of, one of my darker values. I've got one slightly darker than this that I come in with a little bit later. But at the moment, just going between those two values to start off with, just to start to give me that feel of three dimensions, because obviously he's a little solid object, not a flat 2D. So those levels of light and shade, as I always say, that's what's creating your painting, and that's what's giving you that feeling of form. So I'm starting off just in the grey pencils and going through. So it's quite a repetitive process, and obviously I'm just looking at my reference and really trying to get it as accurate as possible at this stage. Now you can obviously, if you want a more painterly look or whatever, you can go in and perhaps go in with a mid-tone and then lighten and darken from there. But as I often do, especially when I'm doing something detailed like this, I like to sort of get as much info going on as I can right from the start. Then everything sort of builds up from there, really. I like to get these foundations really nicely, beautifully in place so that I know I'm going to get the character. And it keeps me going as I'm going through the painting. If it doesn't go through too much of an ugly stage, and it sort of like feels balanced as you go. Okay, so I'm going to pop a little bit of music on, and obviously I'll pop back in if there's anything I feel, I'm doing different that I need to explain to you. All right, but I'll let you watch the process and hopefully enjoy the music. Thanks very much. I'll see you in a mo. What a pretty little track of music that is. Thank you so much. I found it was actually called my Little Garden of Eden, and I thought, oh, that's just perfect for here. Loved it. You can sort of the panpipes and things, just sort of suitable for cherubs, I guess. So as you saw, I've been working out from his sort of features outwards, round from his head and things. Now you can do this in any order you want, really. I would suggest, as I say, working between your dark and your light, and do as much as you feel. I sort of, once I got his head in, I wanted to go onto his hand to make sure that I got the side of his head in the right place and things. So that's what I've been doing. Just going through with those two values, and I'm just coming in with one of my lighter tones now, just to give myself a little bit of a feel of where that. It's hardly discernible on the paper, but I want to get some pastels down there, rather than it being there before I come in with my bigger pastels. I just want to get some pastel pencil under there, because I'm going to be rubbing all this in a moment. So I want to give myself some pastel there to move around with. Now, as I say, as I mentioned earlier, you can definitely do this all in soft pastels, but perhaps make your picture a little bit bigger, or else it would be very difficult to get in all those little tiny places and things. But you can use bigger pastels, or you can make it more painterly, but as I say, I wanted a detailed one on this, so I'm using my pastel pencils. So as you can see, coming in with that lighter value now, and just sort of like popping that in the areas where he's got his highlights, and the stone is at its lightest. And so there we go. I've got, got a bit of my cherub. And as you saw, working between the background and the foreground. Now I'm just putting a bit more, initially I just sort of did around the little cherub. And now I'm coming in and doing a little bit more of the background. Again, just to get my balance. I'm using my two different darks, one slightly darker than the other. And just looking at my reference photo, a lot of this, when you want to paint realistically, you really are always going constantly between, looking at your photo reference and, back to your painting, seeing those levels of light and dark. But as you can see, you can obviously, this would obviously be much quicker if you did, it could be, much quicker if you did it in pastels, this bit, in your soft pastels. But, I'm a lover of the pencil, so as I've got it in my hand, I just as well do it. But as you can see, I'm using my pastel pencil on the side. Also using, having my hand towards the end of the pastel, so that I can try and, keep it loose back there. The thing with pastel pencils, it's, you want to get very, very detailed. So just using it on my side, using it at the end so that I can keep my marks fairly loose, so that when that sort of foliage goes on top, we've got those layers of looseness underneath, that are all going to blend in. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to come back in and I'm going to blend this in. But what I'll do, just let you watch this sort of like little bit come to its place. And then when I come back in with my blending, I'll pop back in. All right then, I'll see you in a mo. So as you can see, just using those two pastels, I've given myself an indication of what's going on in that background. And as you might have noticed, I'm just using them in different pressures, like where it's a little bit lighter. Obviously, I just lighten my pressure a little bit more. And that's what I'm doing, sort of, building up those dark areas and just trying to get my balance of light and dark there. And if you're struggling, to see your lights and darks when you've got the image in colour, just pop your image into black and white or grayscale, and then you can really see where your darkest areas are and your lightest. That's a really good tip if you're struggling. I mean, it's fairly obvious on this one, but it does help. So now what you're seeing me doing is I'm coming in with my makeup sponge at this point. I'm using my makeup sponge in the areas where I want it sort of more soft and out of focus. In those background trees, we want to push those to the back, so everything is going to be out of focus a little bit more. You're not going to see as much detail. And as we come forward, and sort of around the cherub and things and these, some of the grasses there, you're going to get more detail. And as I come around the cherub, I'm going there now and I'm sort of thinking, oh gosh, I don't want too much of this grey going onto the cherub because I want to build up my colours as I go. So I don't want too much of it, overflowing onto him. But I'm not sort of too fussed if a little bit of that background pastel goes over him. We can easily cover it. And now I've swapped to a piece of pipe foam insulation to sort of get in, because I can get a corner on that. So to get in sort of like around those edges and things, just so I don't get it too mucky, just popping in with that. Okay, so as you saw, I put a few different colours in all those darkest areas. I had a dark blue, the Terry Ludwig eggplant, a little bit of rich burgundy in there, and a little bit of, I then went in, coming up the value scale a little bit more, I went in with a bluey green and then used a couple of lighter greens in those areas that are catching the light in that reference photo there. So as you can see, using a few different colours underneath, and as you can see now, coming in with my piece of pipe foam insulation and blending that all back in again. So you can see, the process that I did with my actual pencils isn't absolutely necessary. You can come straight in, at this stage and put your colours down, and you don't necessarily need that. Just totally up to you. It's down to personal preference as to, how detailed and how much help you want to have with your pencils, really. So as you can see, coming in with my pipe foam insulation, giving that all a good rub in, want to push that right down into the tooth of the paper. As you can see, I'm not being too particular. Again, sort of always paying attention to the direction things are growing in, sort of uprights in upright areas and sort of mottly in mottly areas. All right, so I'll let you watch this and I'll pop back in a moment. And so, as you saw, got a little bit more detail on my cherub there, and when the dog underneath, again, always paying observation, paying attention to where those shadows are falling on him and things. And now what I'm going to do is I'm popping popping back into the background now for a little while. And I'm going to sort of reestablish those colours. So going back in with the same colours that I used before, but putting them on top of that nice soft outer focus feel that I've already got going on there. So again, starting with my darkest and, again, sort of looking at the reference photo, seeing where things are starting to change and starting to lighten in value, as you go through that foliage. But as I say, use the same colours that I did before, using a little bit more burgundy in places, a little bit more of the Terry Ludwig I've got in my hand where it's really darkest. Because amongst my darks, they do vary in their tone. And the Terry Ludwig darkest and the other darkest blue I used, and then the burgundy is just that slightly little bit lighter. So looking at my foliage, seeing where it starts to sort of change and things. And as I say, sort of mainly using the same colours that that I was doing. But actually the pastel in my hand is actually a really dark green now. I'm going to add a little bit more green to this because obviously we've got those nice sort of dark burgundies and blues and things going on underneath. But obviously, this foliage, it is green. So introducing a few different greens here. Now with my green colours, in general, I've gone on the cooler side of green, because it's most of this is in shadow, and so therefore you're going to have cooler colours going on there, not so many warm ones. So I've just got a little bit of warmth in that burgundy when I come up the value scale a bit, but the greens in general are on the cooler side as I'm using them. So now we're going to go, now I've kind of got sort of to the point of the background and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I'm kind of happy with that at this stage. I'm coming back onto my cherub. Now I'm starting off with his wing. And the first sort of colour you saw me going in, I'm going to add a little bit of green in there. That wing is slightly different to the rest of him. It's not quite as mossy there. You've got bits of moss and things, but it's a little bit lighter than he is in general. But he has got that sort of tinge of greeny blue there. So popped in a little bit of green underneath there. And I'm going to be going between sort of the soft pastel. If I've got a big enough space and there's I'll pop a bit of soft pastel in it. It'll, sort of save me the work with the pencils and things, especially if I just want to do a tint or something like that. But as you can see, I'm coming now in over the top of that soft green with this sort of creamy colour pencil here. And what I'm doing is I'm using, as we were doing earlier, using the pencil sort of kind of on its side and in the direction, those sort of pretend veins are going on his wing there. I don't want these wings to feel too heavy, so I want to try and get a little bit of lightness there. I mean, obviously they're not fairy wings as such, but they're not as heavy as obviously he is. They're a little bit softer there. And what you can see me doing now is I'm coming in with a dark green pastel. Now this is a colour that's kind of going to tone in with the background, means I can kind of neaten up the edges of those wings. A lot of this on his wings especially, it's quite defined, isn't it, between his wing and the background. It's quite a sharp edge. So I'd like to get these edges on his wings nice and neat if possible. So as I say, I'll come back in I sort of go between the sort of background and the foreground, neatening up as I go. There I'm coming in with a dark grey, because it's slightly darker than the green. That's the darkest green I've got in a pencil. So I'm using that really dark grey that I used on him. And, that's it. I'm just trying to sort of meld it in with the existing background that we've got and try and just sharpen those wings. Okay, so as you can see, sort of, I've got his wing to a point that I feel kind of happy at the moment. It's really, unfortunately, it's really working with these light colours. It's quite difficult for you to see these subtle changes on the camera, but they are there. And when you look up close and personal to them, you can see the changes in colour. But it's very, very subtle. But that's what I want at the moment. So now I'm coming on to his little derriere, again, sort of utilising the creamy colour that I used, and I'm now going to introduce, in those mossy areas and things, I'm introducing a couple of greens here now. Now, all throughout this painting, a lot of this is just you literally going through and observing and painting what you see. Don't paint what you think you see, paint what you actually see, and pay attention to, the angles of things, and, where those little mossy patches are and things like that. Because obviously, the moss collects in the little grooves, and you want to try and make this feel as natural as possible. So start off, with the things that you see you see clearest first. As I say, there's no particular order to this, because it's all fairly light in its values. You're working at the lighter end of the sort of tonal values. Oh, excuse me. You're working at the lighter end of the tone, so you haven't got huge amounts of difference. And everything on here is very subtle. And what we're just doing is just gently starting to build up those layers. And as you see, as I mentioned earlier, use your pastel pencil in the way you feel is right for a space. Sometimes you want to create a line, in which case use it on its tip. Sometimes you want to create some shading, and obviously, where the moss is kind of growing and it's started to go green and things. I'm using sort of a circular motion there in my pencil. So all the time, all through your painting with whatever you're doing, try and go in the direction that you want things to go. It really will help you start to build up depth in that painting. So what I'm doing, obviously, putting a little bit of green at the bottom of his thigh there, looking, as I say, looking at that reference photo, seeing where you're starting to get your darker tones, and start, where there's a little bit of colour on him. In general, he's mainly sort of creamy grey, nice warm greys there, but there is that moss, and I, as I said to you earlier, I really want this to feel like a little statue, with all of his little moss and things. He's landed a while, and he's having a little snooze, and as I say, he's such a gorgeous little character. It was really beautifully done, whoever did the original little statue. So now coming back in with my sort of darker grey, defining underneath that thigh, where it's getting darkest, and literally what I'm doing is just going through, observing, just keep looking, and just keep building up slowly and surely, and you'll get there. Okay, so I'll let you watch me sort of go on for a few minutes, building up this, looking at my lights and darks, and I'll pop back in a mo. So obviously, be going through those little areas on his bottom and his tummy and things. As I say, looking where the light and, shadows are and the, lightest and darkest. And, now, coming back in with my sponge. And as you see, I'm sort of putting pastel down and then taking it off or rubbing it in, depending on, what effect I want in any area. Sometimes I'm dabbing that little sponge in. So I'm creating sort of like a mottly effect. As I say, we want to get this sort of moss and mildew and things that's growing on him to feel natural. And in places it's kind of mottly, and in other places, it's quite thick and stuff. So we want to try and get that. So that's what I'm doing. Literally, I put some down, and then, depending on how it's gone in any one area, I'll either smooth it out or dab it, or sometimes I just do it with my finger. Sometimes I come in with a tool. But it's like a constant process of going backwards and forwards, sort of putting some down, maybe lifting some out, strengthening certain areas. And at the moment, I'm actually using that little sponge. I've actually got a pastel in my hand. I really want a nice soft tint, really. So I'm using that sponge. I'm literally rubbing it along, rubbing it on my soft pastel, and just putting a little bit down on that sponge, just to give me that little soft tint there. Now coming back in with my pencil, and that's it. Literally going backwards and forwards between it. We're only using a few colours here, but we're able to build up this level of form by just paying attention to where it's darkest, lightest, and where where your colours are hitting. So I'll let you watch me sort of like pull his face together, take care around his face, around to all of his little features. Try to make sure that you're observing sort of your angles and the sizes of things and the relationship to things. And like where those shadows are forming. For example, you're going to see me coming in under his nose in a minute, so that his little nose is going to pop out of his face. Out there, you did just see me with the pastel there. I'm literally just wiping that sponge just over that pastel, just to pick up a bit of colour, and just giving it that little bit of tint on there. All right, so I'll let you watch me sort of like pull out his nose as I'm doing there now, and his little nostrils and things, and I'll see you in a mo. So as I'm whizzing around my little cherub there, I'm just popping in with a little commercial break and sort of like, hope you're enjoying the video. If you do, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It'll really help me grow and I'd love to bring you some more videos. And obviously if you want to watch this video sort of like where I slow down and take you through, obviously I've got more audio and take you through sort of more of the nuances as I go through, please consider joining me over on Patreon. I'd love to see you over there. Okay, so I'll let you watch some more and I'll see you in a mo. So as you can see, it's sort of like going around redefining, what we did do, building it up. And as you can see, it's starting to get, it's really starting to get the feeling of he's got cracks on him and the moss is building up and things. And there's starting to be a little bit of definition between him and the log there. And now I'm sort of like at that lower part of the log where it's, where it's sort of like all more mottly and things. And I just wanted to sort of point this out at the moment, just to show you that, I'm changing my pencil strokes depending on where I'm at. And as you can see at the moment, popping in a few little lines and things. And then, down at the bottom there, I'm sort of like doing a scumbling motion. I'm really just trying to do the strokes that are going to give me the effect that I want. They're coming in between with a darker line there, where the top of that has come away from the bark has come away from the log itself and things. So making sure that line in there is quite dark. And all the time paying attention to my reference photo, just keep going backwards and forwards, getting the balance, bringing some things forward, pushing some things back and varying my strokes. But as you can see, just with those few different colour pencils and just sort of changing the emphasis depending on where I am in the log and what sort of effects I want anywhere. All right, so this goes on for a few more moments, and then we'll go, once we've got him to a stage that I'm happy with, we're going to go on to the background. But I'll let you watch me sort of carry on, and you can, as I say, pay attention to how my marks are going, how I'm putting them down, and, sort of like, although I do pop around, there's method in my madness, but it's just as I see things, as they're going through. Okay, so I'll let you watch this, and I'll pop back for the last, when we get back into that background. Okay then, thanks so much. See you in a mo. And so now I'm going to go, my cherub, I'm feeling pretty happy with him. He really is coming together now, and he kind of looks like a stone statue. Might pop back and revisit him, but for the time being, I'm really happy with him. So I'm going off back into my background now, and I really want to start, getting this going now. So the first thing you're seeing me doing is coming in with my darker greens there, and just sort of adding a little bit more to that background that we had. It's wonderful. It's a lovely little shady nook he's found himself in, but there's some wonderful, bright, vivid colours around him, which I really loved. So really would like to capture that background. I'm not necessarily, fussed if every single leaf's in the right place and things, but I do want to get a feel. So I am sort of referring back to my reference photo on this, and I'm having a look at, obviously all where those darkest areas are. And you're seeing me going between sort of like my darkest value, there, that really rich dark green, tiny little piece of pastel I've got left there. But I'm making the most of it. Every little granule I like to make the most of. So anyway, as you can see, so sort of like defining the bottom of my trees. Remember, as everything is closer together, at the bottom it bunches up there, so you've not got as much light in there. And literally what I'm doing is I'm coming up the value scale, getting sort of like each time round I'm getting a little bit more in focus. I'm sort of like going between my greens and, just sort of starting to bring some forward and things and trying to get a little bit of dimension in there. And as you can see at the moment, I've got a hard pastel in my hand, and I'm just using it on its side, just to create some of those sort of, tree trunks, to give us the, idea that there's some tree trunks and things going on in the background there. So just using, that pastel on its side to get a nice sharp edge. But as you can see, I didn't go round and, sort of do straight lines and things. I just used it on the side of its, on its side and sort of variated, moved where I was going with it and things. Just so, as you can see, it sort of created a little bit more of a random feel there and a little bit more natural. And that's it. I'll just keep going back and sort of going backwards and forwards. Now I've decided I've got sort of my level of darkness behind that area. I'm coming in with a really nice, bright, vivid green. In the reference photo here, you've got a few leaves showing. So I'm going to put a few, you know, they're a little bit closer to us and they're very, you know, gorgeous and vivid and things. So as you can see, just put a couple there just to give me an indication. Again, not worry too much, you know, if it's not exactly the same. That really doesn't bother me. You know, now it's really sort of become my, you know, my painting, as yours will become yours, you know, and this is the wonderful thing. Once you kind of get to this stage, you know, it's really up to you where you want to take it, and how much of that, you know, that background, how prominent you want it or how much you want it to sink into the background. But as I say, I love the sort of the contrast of these gorgeous, vivid colours, you know, set as a backdrop for this little chap here. And so you're now seeing me coming in with this is another, you know, the same bright green that I used for those little leaves, coming up again in the value scale. And I've chosen a really, really chromatic pastel here. It's got a lot of colour in it and it's very, very vivid. Very, very vivid. I put my teeth in. It's very vivid and bright. And as you can see, just, you know, again, sort of picking out some ideas of some, you know, stronger things going on there. So you're going to see me sort of working through the bush here and this background, and just sort of like laying, you know, getting lighter in value, pushing some areas back and bringing some forward. But as I say, I'm paying a little bit of attention to my reference photo purely for sort of like where the lights and darks are, just to make sure that I don't go off too much on it, because I do love this little scene. All right, so I'll let you watch this and I'll pop back in a mo. So as you saw, put a couple, you know, came up the value scale and just kept going back between my values, and ended up there just putting a couple of really little more brighter, lighter ones, just picking out some of the leaves. We'll go back in and revisit that. But for the time being, I've got myself, you know, that's kind of the balance that I want going on down there. So what I'm doing is I'm coming into the foreground. And again, at the moment I've picked up one of my harder pastels. This is a cool green, sort of mid-tone green, and I'm just trying to give myself an indication of you know, some of those grasses in there, you know, and just sort of trying to, you know, get some patches of light going on in these grasses. But you know, as with above, you know, I'm always using my pastel, you know, to give me different effects in different areas, you know. So your pastel is so many paintbrushes all in one, you know, depending on how you put it down. You know, so when I was up in the bushes, I'm doing sort of more, you know, scumbly strokes in areas, picking out the odd leaf, you know, making some of my strokes heavier, making some of them, you know, softer, you know, just so that I'm trying all the time creating that depth in it, you know, and all the time trying to make it feel natural, you know, not as if somebody sort of just plonked some leaves on there, or, you know, all the grasses are growing in the same direction and things. So that's it, you know, use your pastel. Like I say, it's so many paintbrushes in one. So, you know, use it to create those, you know, those different shapes and things. You're just seeing me now just popping back in with my putty rubber. I'm just lifting out where I want my little yellow flowers to go now. I'm going to start putting those in. And I don't want too much green, you know, and or too much dark underneath those. Because yellow's a colour that can get muddy quite quickly. And I want those little dandelions, I think they are, you know, to be really bright and vivid. They're little pops of gorgeous colour in there. So, you know, I'm lifting out a little bit of that pastel that I did, and I've just done that with a little bit of putty rubber. And so now coming into my little daffodils now, starting off with a slightly darker, greeny yellow or yellowy green, then coming up the value scale, there's that yellowy green again now. And basically what I'm doing is I'll start with this one, yellowy green to start with, which is a slightly darker value, coming in now with a sort of more goldeny yellow, brighter, and now coming in with a citrusy yellow, mixing warm and cool there to try and give me, the feel of those little flowers there. Again, not being too particular, it doesn't matter. I just want to give myself an impression that we've got those pretty little flowers there. And I'm choosing where I'm placing them. Really what I want to do is, they're little pops of colour, so you kind of, they're popping you around the painting. So I'm going to have a couple sort of like in front of my little cherub, and then sort of, through my cherub, and then leading you off into that little woodland there. And that's it. What I'm doing is I'm just seeing I put in a few there, seeing the level of light that, brightness that I want. And also, having a look at the shape and things that I'm creating. Again, not worry too much if they're not, pointing in different directions. And that's it. When you come to do these little flowers, make sure that you kind of give them slightly different sizes, slightly different angles and things. Make sure your brain doesn't make them all uniform. Try and get a little bit of variation going on there. But the process of building them is exactly the same. Darkest colour, then a nice yellow, then the citrusy yellow on the top. And when I'm putting that top colour down, I'm putting that down quite hard. The greeny colour underneath, putting down slightly softer, and then getting harder as I come up. So that there's that vivid yellow is just going to complement what's going on behind it. But as I say, be quite careful, especially if you're working between warm and cool, which I am here. The colour that I'm putting down now, that's a warm yellow, and this is a cooler yellow, cooler and brighter. So you kind of want to get them down in that order, really, and then not go too much back into them if you can possibly help it. But as you can see, I'm coming round. If I want to tidy one up, just coming in with a pastel pencil, or you could come in with a dark value behind. Really up to you. And as I say, just depends on what marks you've ended up putting down, as to how your little ones are going to, how you're going to tidy them up or not. You can just leave them really loose. Again, totally up to you. But as we've got sort of quite a little detailed picture here, I wanted to really, make these little flowers pop and, join in with his, they're sort of all around him there as he's having his little snooze. Love this little guy. Okay, so I'll let you watch me sort of like go through. As you can see, I've put in most of my dandelions there. I'll put in a few more. Every now and again, you're going to see me putting in grasses, and as I am doing now, using a different colour than I did last time, but along similar lines, and then I'm going to build up in the areas where that sunshine sort of, or where the light is peeking through and catching the tops of those grasses and things. All right, so I'll let you watch this, and I'll be back in a mo. All right, so I do believe we're there. I'm pretty happy with this little guy. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've had a go at painting, and if you have, I'd love to see your version. Thanks for spending some of your time with me. I do appreciate it. I wish you a lovely week, and if you do, happy painting.